Why? Oh, yeah. So didn't get to put this up very early, so we'll see how many people get alerts, but we'll give it a second. Obviously, I haven't been able to stream for the last 2 weeks. I barely got home in time, and I left early. So, yeah, that should probably say a few things about the struggle that is Tuesdays right now. But we'll get into that in a sec. We'll let people come in. We'll talk about that part. Trying to think, what can I update on in the meantime while I let some folks show up? So this Saturday, I'll be actually out doing some filming at a local business. If you guys have been watching for a while, I think it was like 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 at this point. It was in the middle of COVID when I did an interview with Nick from Shrimpy Business. And he's had a bunch of changes to like his business. He's been doing phenomenally well. So we're going to do a big update with him and actually get to go tour his, should we call it facility? I think I don't want to spoil too much because I think it's going to be great getting an update with him. I mean, he's so fun to talk to. And for those that maybe like don't remember off the top of your head, he's the guy who used to be a chemical engineer, and he quit his chemical engineering job to sell shrimp. Yeah, you heard that right. dude is pretty awesome. But his business has been doing pretty well. He's just been steadily growing. He's got like this whole new setup basically because he used to do it out of the basement of his house, and now he's actually at like a dedicated facility. I don't know how to put it elsewise, but warehouse, I don't know. We'll see, but we'll go tour that and get a catch up with Nick and kind of talk about well, not just shrimp, but like his kind of insights on what the shrimp business is like. Because for many of you who probably watched, like, say, Garden of Eater as an example with Grant and Shelby, this is my more local version of that. And I think it's always cool for me to talk to people who are really good at something that, like, I'm not good at. And, also help because getting people into things is really interesting. Shrimp eventually is something I want to do. I've been pondering how to do shrimp in my house because I can't put them with rainbows, right? So I basically have to have a dedicated tank, and in what way I want to do that. And I've been thinking about potentially when I kind of redo my desk setup, whenever I can get to that, of making the tank in the background a shrimp tank as opposed to a fish tank, because it's really hard for me to do like rainbows in smaller tanks. So I can't really do a big tank up in this area, or at least not near my desk. It would be like impossible. So we'll see. Okay, so we'll talk partial topic, although hello everybody, good to see folks coming in. Kingfisher's Catch update from me. I'm looking into an electrical apprenticeship working on a solar installation company, Solar Fish Room. Actually, if you're in an area that gets good sun, so like this would be something like people in Florida could easily do this, or if you're in like say Arizona, California, I would be really curious if you had like a dedicated fish room, right, like a garage or something like that, how little solar you would need to run it. Because if you're doing it pretty efficiently, like you're doing a big air loop and you're really just running like linear pistons and not too much other stuff, and you naturally have the kind of fair weather where you don't have to constantly run heater or air conditioning, I imagine your power draw is pretty low and you could do it effectively free with not that much solar, which would be really cool. I'm sure there's somebody out there who's doing that, and it would be really awesome to see it. But yeah. Waving, don't get into the shrimp hobby. It's very addictive. I like shrimp, but I'm not the person who's going to dive super deep into shrimp. I would just like to keep like, really what I want is, I love the yellow neocaradinas a lot, and the blue caradinas, and cherry shrimp. Like I just like the basic neocaradinas. I'm not really into like all the crazy patterns, like the wishbones or all the insanely expensive Galaxy Pinto whatever caradina shrimp. That's outside of my like realm. I think the closest I would get to that would be potentially like a cardinal shrimp, but those really require some very specific stuff, and that'd be something where I'd need more dedicated space and interest, as opposed to just being like, I just want to be able to keep Neos alive and not screw them up. Because I've screwed them up way too many times. But I have had a successful colony for a while. Back when I was doing more small tanks, I had a successful blue neocaradina, the Blue Dreams, for quite a while. And then I gave tons of them to my friend Alyssa, and that is when my colony, like, crashed. So, maybe it was good timing. All right. Let me get on topic. The short version of this. I don't know how reliably I can stream on Tuesdays right now. Because of my work and the amount of traffic getting home, even when I leave early, it is very, very difficult for me to get home by what my standard streaming time is. And typically, after my normal stream time, there's like a small window of time for basically like dinner at my house, and then my wife usually does an evening game stream. So it's kind of tough to shift things around as far as timing is concerned on a Tuesday. So I've been trying to think about this last couple weeks when I've been missing streams, and when I got really sick and missed an entire video, how I can fix that. And I came up with a couple of options. And chat, I'm curious what your thoughts are, but I'll probably build like a community poll on this, or maybe even a short video. I'm not sure. Just because I would like to get as much feedback as possible. Because I want to do what I feel best serves you guys, right? Because I certainly don't want to just completely drop streams. But it might be one of those things where for a period of time while I'm working the way I'm working, I need to like change potentially to no streams for a little bit. So let me dive into those couple of things, and then like Oinky, I'll answer your question. So my first thought was this: I could kind of invert the schedule that I have, which is to say, I normally release a video every Saturday, and I could release a video on a different day and stream like Saturday mornings at a similar time to when I release my videos. Now, there's some positives and negatives to that. Positive is a completely different time window, so it might open it up to different people who normally are in replay crew and can't watch. Negative of that is that a lot of you who are regulars here might then not be able to be live. And maybe it's a timing thing, right? Because for the East Coast, that's going to be like noon your time, and that seems like a really bad time on a Saturday, unless you're like truly a super fish nerd. But it could be a matter of like fixing times too, and changing the time and stuff like that to try and find what works best for most folks. And of course, there's always a replay crew. You can always rewatch things, and it would keep it like having a topic for the first half of the stream and then going into Q&A. Kind of the alternative to that is, until such a time as my schedule gets better, having no streams, but instead replacing that with a video where we kind of do the Q&A section. So it would be something where between my email and community posts, we would gather some questions and answer some questions in that video to kind of replace the stream. Now that would take away from kind of the live topic, because the alternative is we just do a second video every week. And it's like a very specific topical video. as opposed to something more like what the streams tend to be, where there's a big question and answer session. I love the question and answer session because I get tons of questions, but two, I like being able to help folks when they have questions. It's something I love a lot. It's why I like live streaming. But I recognize that like a continual series of videos is just answering questions might not be as appealing to some folks compared to when you're here live and you can kind of like hear part of my answer and then maybe clarify or ask a follow-up question, right? Things like that. And I totally recognize that like in a live format, question and answer works a lot better. So yeah, this is kind of like the three options. One is we flip it and I stream on like Saturday or probably never Sunday. Let's be honest. I'm a football psycho and Sundays just does not work for me. But and then we'd have our normal video like Tuesday or Wednesday. It might be a different day than what the normal stream time is, but release it midweek. The second option is instead of streams until such a time as my schedule shifts and I can reliably stream again, doing a like question and answer video where I gather questions from you guys, whether that's the community tab or you email me, whatever the heck that may be. It's probably a combination of multiple, let's be honest here. It might be fishing for questions out of comments and videos, and talking about, giving those question and answer things, because I think that helps. Nathan, let's all vote Sunday and see if we're more important than football. Can't take my religious time of prayer away from me, Nathan. That's not nice. That's really disrespectful of my religion. There would probably only be like one. I mean, it might be like one or two games in an entire season that would interrupt what the time I would probably stream. So yeah, it wouldn't be too bad. In theory, Sunday works. It's just suboptimal. And then the final one is until such a time as I can get back to streaming again, we would instead do a topical video. So we have 2 topical videos a week. That cuts out the Q&A part, which I love that a lot, but I understand where pre-recorded Q&As might not be as interesting, especially if it's just kind of like, it would be mostly my face, right? They kind of need to be something that's easier to film. There is some editing, right? I'm not going to have like these big swaths of stuff where we don't have things. We've done stuff like this before where we've done some pre-recorded questions and I've put up videos in place of streams when I had like club meetings on Tuesdays. So yeah, it would be trying to do that level of experience. I think that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. My brain's a little fried. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts, and I'll kind of watch what chat is. Replay crew, just leave a comment, and then if all else fails, I'll put something in the community tab as a poll, just to kind of get everybody's feel of what they want, and try and make a decision from there. Real fish nerds would do Saturday nights. We have a life. I mean, there's that too, right? I could stream at a later time, either on Tuesdays itself and work that out with my household. That's kind of like a fourth option, is we shift the stream even later, which I recognize for like East Coasters, Europeans, Australians, that can be pretty rough. For West Coast time, it's not so bad, but if I'm looking at like the last couple weeks, I've been making it home like after when I would have started my stream normally, so I probably would have had to push it at least an hour back. But yeah, it's just a matter of trying to find what works in the meantime until either I get in a better cadence of work and can like get to the point of where I was when I worked at Microsoft for a while, where it was I could leave early on Tuesdays and make streams, and it didn't impact my work because I had the ability to do some level of remote work. or just knew that my team was in such a place that I didn't have to worry, which was more the case. Or two, it's we shift some kind of schedule around, or I don't know, maybe I find a different job, because that's very possible too. My goal long term is actually to get back to remote working, because I really like not losing 3 hours of my life to being in my car in traffic every day. That's my commute right now. My shortest commute in the last 2 weeks has been an hour and 15 minutes each way. So I'm losing 2.5 hours of my life just to commuting. I don't know, for many of you, you're probably like, that's called normal, Bentley. But when the last 2.5 years I've been working remotely, and I get extra time with my wife, my dogs, working on fish room stuff, trying to keep everything up to shape, I have come to value that a lot. And I am very fortunate that I work in a career field where remote work is possible. So yeah, probably going to try and get back to that, because there are a number of places that just are still remote. And I'm trying to get back into that life. Stephen P., I've been working remotely for 12 years. I can never go back. Yeah, I mean, I think if you are in a field where it's possible, and you're not one of those people who just really values that face-to-face human contact, because working remotely, I would constantly talk to my teammates. We would just jump in basically open mic chat sessions while we were working, because we could help each other really fast. It was very easy to shift if we had questions, whatever that would be. At Amazon, as an example, they use this program called Slack, and there's what's called a huddle. A huddle is just a voice call, right? But me and two of the other main quality assurance engineers that I worked with the most, we were constantly, if we weren't in a meeting, we were in huddles, and half the time we were just BSing, because it would be the same thing if we were working side by side. We're working on our work at the same time, but we're just kind of talking and going through stuff and all those kind of things, right? If driving is your job, would you consider 11 hours a day your commute? Asking for a friend. I mean, it's not your commute at that point. My problem is, so in that 11 hours a day, you're hopefully paid for all 11 of those hours, or at least 10 of them, I would hope, right? Where in my case, it's 2.5 to 3 hours of my life, I'm not spending time doing the things I want, and I'm not being paid. And eventually, as you get older, I'm sure many of you are in this boat. You're like, if I am being paid for it, I don't want to do something I don't want to do. And obligations to family, you kind of rat hole away into things I want to do. It's if I'm running an errand, or if I'm doing the groceries, or whatever those things may be, right? All that stuff. Those are things I want to do, because they're just necessary things to do the right thing for my household and my family. But when it's just driving to go to a building to do work that I definitely could do remotely, it's hard to be very enthusiastic about it. But yeah, just being a smart arse. Hey, I respect it, man. There's differences. If you work construction, you really can't do that remotely, right? If you're building things with your hands, it's hard to do that remotely. Things like that. But yeah. Anyway, I'll try and get off this tangent of me complaining and bitching about my privileges because of the field I work in. It's the only way I can say it. I have to say it with a laugh, because it's just life, right? But yeah, so that's kind of where we're standing right now. It's very possible also, if people are just cool with me pushing the start time later and staying on Tuesdays, then that will work too for me, because it doesn't matter so much to me that the start time goes back later, because again, West Coast time. My wife might not be so happy, but she can deal 1 day a week. I'll make it up to her. But yeah, we'll figure that stuff out. Thank you for letting me therapeutically complain. I appreciate all of you. Now we'll go through question and answers. If you guys have fish-related questions, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see them. And we'll dive into some of the stuff. So, first, Root, Bentley, I stumbled upon an older video of Danger Newell recently. I love Danger Noodle. It moved me to get a Dojo Loach. Is Danger Noodle still around? No, Danger Noodle unfortunately passed away. I do have other Dojo Loaches. So, we had Danger Noodle, who we adopted at first. Every Dojo Loach I have adopted from other people. So it's kind of become a pattern, but eventually I will have like a dedicated Dojo Loach tank, mostly for my wife, and that'll get pretty fun and wild. I'm actually really looking forward to doing that at some point. So anyway, we adopted Danger Noodle from, that was in the video where we talked about the guy's tank had cracked and he needed help. That's an old video now, man, but it's still that night like rings clear as day in my head. Then eventually, there were a couple other Dojo Loaches from a local who was moving completely out of state that I adopted. They were all older. They're all adults. And of those adult dojos, only one of them is still alive. We call her thickness, because she was the bigger of the two females that came with this little trio. And then I recently adopted two more Loaches. One's a full-size adult male, and the other one is a younger male who's maybe like a third the size. He's still got good size to him. You know, he's kind of long, but he doesn't have that big body like some of the bigger adults do, and he's not nearly as long as a full-size adult. So that's Rocket is the little guy. So we have Rocket, her thickness, and then the larger of the two males, which they're like the big spotted pattern. They both look, actually, they're really good looking fish, I'll be honest. Is had a number of names, but we're sticking with Woody or Woodrow, depending on how you want to go with it. I prefer Woody because it helps me differentiate between the woodpeckers that occasionally try to live in my backyard, who we call the Woodrows, versus Woody the Dojo Loach. But at one point, his former owner, who is a local and again was like moving to basically live a more like nomadic life, she's going to be living basically in an RV and just kind of traveling the whole time because she does a lot of remote work, so she doesn't have to be stuck to one place. And she can't really take a big fish tank for Dojo Loaches with her. She was trying to do something small, if I remember correctly. But she called him Peckerhead because he likes to chase other fish quite a lot. And what he does now, and this is kind of hilarious, is he will chase the adult bozeman that's in the tank, and then Rocket will chase him. And whenever he gets tired and bored and goes away, then the bozeman will chase Rocket around. But they're all kind of just playing, and it's really funny to watch because they'll sit there and spin circles and go all over the tank, and then when like one gets bored, a different fish like tries to re-instigate and keep chasing each other around and swimming around. And it's oddly adorable to watch because these fish like don't live in the same environment naturally. So seeing them actually get along really, really well has been very fun. Okay. Oiki. Clean out canister after losing power for 2 days. So I have had canisters lose power for 2 days and not clean them out and not had issues. However, I was in an extremely heavily planted tank and a very large tank. So this is a 140-gallon tank. This is the Guppy Mansion. And it was on FX6 that lost power for about 2 days. In general, I would never suggest someone do what I did. And in hindsight, I would not have done that if it wasn't a matter of I had so many filters that I was trying to take care of that one canister, because it was probably the most densely planted tank of all my tanks, I was like, this one should be okay. And I focused on all the others. I probably would, if it's not too much work, before letting it fire back up, just to make sure, one, you clean out all the gunk. You'll still keep whatever bacteria is alive is still going to stay in there, but if you had any like potential ammonia spikes from dying parts of the bacterial colony, you'll clean that out, and it's just a safety precaution. I think once you hit that 48-hour mark, that's where it's kind of worth doing the cleaning wherever possible. I understand that, like, if you have too many tanks, that can be difficult. And Oinky, with some of the things that you deal with, I understand that sometimes it can be difficult to get everything taken care of. But if you can, I would. Just as a safety precaution. Is it absolutely necessary? Like, if you've serviced that filter recently, within the last, say, like, month, yeah, I wouldn't stress too much. But if it's like, I haven't cleaned that filter out in like 6 months, it was kind of due anyway, we probably should get that bad boy cleaned up. And you don't need to do something crazy, right? Just a good thorough rinse is sufficient. You don't have to like bleach all your media or anything really wild like that. A good thorough rinse should get everything off. You know, maybe power wash it a touch, get something with a little bit of water power to it, water pressure, just to make sure that some of the excess stuff is frictioned away, so to speak. But I wouldn't be too stressed. I don't think you have to go like all the way to bleach levels. Leo, I'd watch whichever works for you. Team Bentley for the win. Thanks, buddy. Really appreciate it. Yeah, man. Yeah. We had a Costco open recently in Washington State, which is kind of rare, right? Because, you know, if you're used to Costco, everything's the Kirkland brand. But Kirkland's the city I grew up in. The first Costco was, well, okay. First, depends on how you want to look at the full history of what is Costco, but the first modern Costco of what we associate to be Costco today was like 5 minutes from the house I grew up in. It was literally down the hill from my high school. So I've spent a lot of time at Costco, and needless to say, Washington has lots of Costco. So a new Costco opening in Washington is kind of rare these days. And yeah, apparently I had friends in like the whiskey community, right, that went, and there were people camping there for like 2 days to try and get rare bottles of whiskey. And I had some friends that went, and they took like pictures, and like there's two different lines. There's the regular line for people trying to go in for, because grand openings at Costco do all sorts of wild, nonsensical sales and things like that to kind of celebrate. And then there was like an entirely different line that was wild as can be for all the whiskey nerds. And they were like, there was something like 150 or 200, somewhere around there, people in line waiting before it opened. Right. And that's like, apparently compared to some of the other Costco openings in other states that don't have as many Costcos, that is quite tame. But it's kind of wild for me to think that like people would go to a Costco on a Thursday at like 6 a.m. and there would still be 100+ people in line waiting for one line, not both, just for the alcohol nerds, not all the regular Costco nerds. The regular Costco nerd line was similarly large. It's like, just wild. I was at work, so that wasn't happening. Oh, man. All right, let me catch up. I know I'm behind on the chats. Oh, not as far behind as I thought. Well, that's what happens. You skip 2 weeks of stream and people just assumes that no one's going to stream ever again. Why even show up? Jackson, what types of fish can I feed frozen bloodworms? I lost an Apisto and a Gardneri killifish to bloat after feeding bloodworms. Really? So my question would be, what frequency are you feeding the bloodworms? And how many fish are in the tank? Because like if you're feeding an entire cube of bloodworms and there's only like a killifish and an Apisto as an example, they're going to eat a lot. And then that's where you run the risk of them eating too much rich protein. It's always good to have some kind of vegetable matter mixed in. So alternate your feeding with other things. Most fish, and I even occasionally feed bloodworms in like rainbows and some of my omnivores, can handle a frozen feeding of bloodworms like once a week without any issue. Now, if you're trying to do this like pure carnivore frozen food diet, I would mix in some of the other smaller things like Cyclops or Daphnia, some of the stuff that is more chitinous, right? So it's got some kind of micro exoskeleton because that provides a bunch of extra nutrients. The thing that we should think about from a pure nutrition standpoint is bloodworms are kind of like if you only ate beef jerky. It's got protein. It's meat. That's all it is. they really don't have any other nutritional content. And fish do need a mixture of nutritional content. Many of our fish in the wild eat all sorts of things that like our normal prepared foods and frozen foods don't contain. And that can be stuff like fruit that falls into the water or leaf litter that is decomposed that creates all sorts of biofilms and microfauna and all that kind of stuff. Even like bacterial level size things that aren't being eaten when you look at their guts, right? Gut content studies and things like that are done in the wild. So when we're feeding our fish at home, I mean, you can get away with like, it's still in my, I need to take this downstairs. I keep forgetting. You can get away with something like Community Crave from Extreme or any other equivalent, right? Where it's a mixture of vegetable and fish-based protein matters. And then mix in your frozen food or live foods. If you are like 100% on frozen or live, use things that have, I hate saying more nutritional content, but more diverse nutritional content. And that's so like Daphnia is really great. There's some of the like spirulina fed Daphnia that's actually really good because it kind of gut loads the Daphnia first, and there's some extra stuff in the cubes themselves that can be really good for a lot of our tropical fish. I personally really love Cyclops and baby brine shrimp in the cubes just because they're small foods, so you don't have the risk of some of your fish struggling with larger food types. Not likely to happen like Apistos and killifish, but just worthy of note. And two, you don't want to feed them the same thing all day, every day. You want some diversity in diet because when they're in nature, they have diverse diets. They eat all sorts of random stuff. Most of the time, they're scavenging through a lot of mulm and muck all the time. They're not eating insects constantly. Mix your foods up. It helps. It helps prevent bloat. It helps prevent any kind of constipation, etc., etc. A good, healthy diet should be pretty varied for our fish. Now, sometimes that variance, again, is something like this, where there's a mixture of protein-based and vegetable-based foods in your processed food. This can work really well. A lot of people don't want to feed only processed food. Some people want to feed only live all the time. If you're in that only live all the time, you kind of have to like gut load the live food you're feeding. Which when you're doing like live Daphnia and stuff, that's pretty easy. That happens naturally. But there are things that you want to supplement into your fish's diet to make sure that they're getting necessary, whether that's fiber so they don't get backed up, or just other parts of their diet they need for healthy bone structure, scales, all those kind of things, right? If we do only bloodworms, and again, I go back to that thought of like, think of it as if you were only eating beef jerky. You're definitely not getting everything you need if you only eat beef jerky, right? Or if you were only eating ground beef, that's it, right? We're, even the most carnivorous things out there generally rely on some level of vegetable matter in their diet, one way, shape, or form. And my example, that would be like dogs, right? Dogs are designed for a heavy carnivorous diet. But if you look at all of the best recipes that are out there as far as like homemade dog food, they always include rice, carrots, peas, and then a good portion of like chicken or some kind of lean meat, right? It's like that for our fish. They need that mixture and that balance to make sure that they're healthy long term. Hope that helps you, Jackson. And I hope you don't ever deal with bloat again, because that's not fun. Not fun. I feel very bad. John, what's up, buddy? Are you going to Fishtoberfest this year? Yes. I wish it wasn't in September. I wish it was actually in October. I'm looking at you, organizers. Why is it still called Fishtoberfest if it ain't in October? Huh? I was complaining about that last year too. I'm probably only there for the Saturday though. I think my goal is to drive down Friday night, spend the night at the hotel there, which means I got to book a room probably now, and be there Saturday and then come home. Just because between my work schedule, I basically can't take any days off unless it's an absolute emergency for the first 90 days, roughly speaking. Yay. And then Just a matter of having time to do other stuff around my house, whether it's like water changes for the fish tanks, or spending some time with my wife, spending some time with the dogs, all those kind of usual things. But yeah, my goal is go down the Friday nights, basically come home for a very short period of time after work, let traffic die down some, and then drive down and probably get there somewhere between like probably like 11 and midnight, to be honest. They're probably late. And then be there Saturday into like the early evening or so, and then head home. That's my goal. That's my goal. So I assume you're going, John, because you've gone pretty much every year. I don't think you've missed a year yet, right? I know we both went last year because we were sitting together listening to Dr. Mass. And he's talking again, which is great. Oh yeah, we're definitely behind. Excellent. Zen Ginger made the last half. Hi, Zenny. Good to see you. Good to see you. Let's see here. Tyler. I recently got an RODI system to soften my water for a very special fish that I plan on purchasing. Any idea how to use RODI system to cut my water hardness? So, okay. RODI in general is going to strip pretty much everything out of your water. It'll get it somewhere between 5 and about 15 total TDS, depending on how much is in your water. So there's a couple of approaches you can do. You can use pure RODI water that you then remineralize back up, because you can't have pure RODI. You'll kill everything, right? If there's nothing in the water, eventually the water will find its nutrition and its necessary dissolved solids by absorbing them out of your fish, your plants, etc. This most commonly is like calcium and magnesium, but can be other things. So that's where people will use like Equilibrium or some of the other powdered products out there to buffer their water's general hardness and carbonate hardness back up, usually to about 4 degrees of both, somewhere around 75 to 100 parts per million, roughly, of each, in order to make sure that everything stays stable and you don't have like big crashes, etc. Or you can do some rough math. And what I mean is, let's say that your water, get a water report or test your water, however, and let's say that your water is like 800 TDS. We're just going to shoot a number out there. And our goal is to be somewhere at like 100 TDS, right? So what you could do is, for every 100 gallons of water you're going to change, you would pre-mix your water. And so usually what you would want for this is like some kind of tote to store your water. And as you do your RODI water for a period of time, and you'll know, like, based on your RODI unit, how much water it's going to produce in RODI versus waste in a given day. And you'll just do some rough math and be like, oh, for every 50 gallons of RODI water that I produce in this tote, I need to add X gallons of my regular water. And then let that mix and settle, have an air stone in there or something like that. Easy peasy. That way it rotates the water. It will slowly mix, keeps it nice and oxygenated. And then what you end up having is a cut down water based on your natural water by mixing it. It'll keep it mineralized to a certain level and keep it safe. That's kind of like the secondary option. So yeah, I hope that helps, Tyler. There's lots of different approaches. There's lots of people talk about RODI systems. Lucas Brett's had an RODI system for quite a while, and he was doing some crazy stuff with his by mixing his water around, especially in the case of like mineralizing specifically for shrimp. But if you know what you're trying to target with a specific fish, you can do a blend of the two waters. And it also depends on what's in your water. Like, you might only have, say, just like maybe you're dealing with very heavy amounts of calcium only in your water, and you don't have a lot of the other minerals that are good to have in your water. You might have to like do some buffering with some extra stuff. You might not need to. It all depends on what's in your water naturally and how you can like mix those together to get what your goal results are. keep in mind, it's a lot of extra work, but if you're chasing something that really has some specific necessities, that's probably the path you're going to have to take. Bobby, how to combat gas on a high-tech CO2 tank? About 30 parts per million CO2 and dosing APT complete. Fuel 3.0 light. Okay, so I'm a little confused at your question. Weekly water change about 50%. So are you saying that like you're struggling keeping it at 30 parts per million, or you're trying to keep gas at that rate and it's getting too high and you're having issues with your fish? That's where I'm a little confused. Maybe give me some clarity, Bobby, and I'll try to answer that question. In general, what I have found is I don't chase a specific parts per million of CO2 in a tank. I don't use drop checkers. I hate them because they can false flag you like crazy. Instead, what I've done is I've kind of tweaked to a method that I like, which is to say my low and slow method. So examples would be like 3 bubbles a second in a 40-gallon breeder, right? With a decent diffuser, and you don't have to have something super fancy and expensive, but a reasonable amount of water flow. It disperses it throughout the aquarium, keeps the CO2 somewhere usually between 20 and 25-ish parts per million. Sometimes it's as low as 15. It just depends on what kind of water movement I'm doing in the tank. But that's enough to boost most of the plants, if I'm not using any really crazy high demand plants, inhibit the algae relatively well, and not make my maintenance a nightmare. Not make it to where it's like I have to maintain the tank every other week, or the plants are going to go too crazy and it's going to look like an untenable jungle that my fish can't even swim through. I personally do not like chasing parts per million. I've gotten to a point now where I just kind of know X bubbles in a given tank gets me the results that I like with the plants that I tend to be planting. Now, in theory, you can try to go for higher gas if you're going for higher demand plants. Let's say you're trying to do some of those like crazy rotalas or some of those other things that really do like a little bit higher level of gas. You can kind of tweak that and mess with it. It's like if Bentley's doing, say, 3 bubbles a second, maybe you do 5, right? Or you get, instead of an in-tank diffuser, you would get an inline reactor, because those inline reactors have a higher diffusion rate of gas into the water, so that even at 3 bubbles a second, you could have higher part per million CO2 because you're losing less CO2 that is not being diffused fully into the water. I can English myself into speaking correctly. So an example of this would be the guy that I got my rimless tank that we're trying to do a project on. Now that my wrist is almost close to where I can lift weight properly again, I can lift like 10 pounds tops, and usually that hurts. It is amazing how long a like significant soft tissue injury can last you as you start getting older in your wrist, on your dominant hand. You know, the one that you instinctively go to grab everything with? I can tell you there's a number of times where I've gone to grab something that was falling or something like that in the house that got bumped, and I'll stop it, but then I'm also in a ton of pain for like 15 minutes afterward. It's not been fun. But it works. That's what matters. It's functional. I didn't break it or anything crazy. It's just healing a lot slower than I'd like. But yeah, so the guy who had that crazy tank that I got, he built an even bigger one, right? He had the big ADA, so the 1200P, the big like 5-foot ADA rimless tank that's like $1 bajillion, right? And he was using the ADA reactor, right, which is a really high quality reactor. It's probably overbuilt. You could do something significantly better DIY, or there's a number of other reactors out there that are way cheaper that do the same thing. But with his reactor and his filtration system, he was only pushing 4 bubbles a second in a 120-gallon tank, roughly speaking. I think it's actually less. I think it's like 100 gallons, but still, think about that. Only like 3 bubbles a second in a 100-gallon tank. And he reliably was sitting at 35 parts per million because of how efficiently the CO2 is diffused into the system due to the reactor. When water's coming out and you see no little bubbles, you know, think about all of your in-tank diffusers and you see the little stream of bubbles and all that stuff. When you have a CO2 system, you see no bubbles whatsoever. that's full diffusion, and you're getting the maximum out of it possible, which also means that your canister lasts significantly longer. So you can use less gas longer and get a similar result. So yeah, a couple of approaches there. The longest way to answer your question known to man. Oh, man. Let's see here. Flatbed. Water changes? You mean from the toilet? Uncle Smiley's Aquariums. How do you feel about feeding potato to plecos? I mean, if you're going to go that route, wouldn't you want to feed sweet potato, if anything, because it technically has better nutrient content than regular potatoes? Unless maybe you're looking at like specific varietals that are the more waxy potatoes, because they tend to actually have more nutrition. Realistically, all the nutrition in a potato sits in the skin. The like actual like flesh of the potato has minimal of like the minerals and all the good stuff, right? It is a little bit better in like yams, but I think you'd be so much better off using like squash, right? Whether that's like yellow squashes or zucchinis, or there's just so many other like squash varietals that you can get throughout the year compared to a potato. Now, granted, potatoes are dirt cheap, but just as far as getting the nutrition that plecos really want long-term to be healthy, I feel like you'd have better success there if you're trying to go like pure vegetable diet. Pumpkin is another example, right? Gourds, your gourd things. I just feel like that'd be a better route. Not as cheap, mind you, but you also could, if you were that industrious and actually good at gardening, grow your own like zucchini and squashes, and just you chop them down into pieces and freeze them in mass if you have a good amount of freezer space. And then you just have little freezer packets to feed every day, right? You just thaw out your freezer packet, etc., and feed all your plecos. To be fair, I am not a pleco authority. I am a casual pleco enthusiast at best. And that's stretching it, let's be fair. But I personally, like, my favorite thing for a while, and it's when they're in season, they're these little packs that are like zucchini and little like yellow squashes that you can buy at Costco. And they're like pickle size, right? They're little bitty ones. But they're so great because you can just cut them in half and put them on a fork or a metal skewer or whatever you've got to weigh them down. Blanch them real fast, just a quick parboil to sanitize them and soften them a touch. And then let them cool and in the tank. And I'll often like freeze them. I'll freeze them in packs where I can just pull out like a row of these half-cut squashes and zucchinis and toss a couple into my plecos when they're in season. Works like a charm. They love them. Of course, if I have too many snails, it becomes a problem because snails devour them. 6 of one, half does the other, right? Feeding something. Mikey, thank you for the input. The tank that I would be in question is an experiment tank with plants, basic pitch level, 125 gallon, currently with no plants, all sand. Yeah, in that case, especially with your blood parrots, let's make sure we maintain that bad boy. Let's give it a quick cleaning, just a good thorough rinse. You should be fine. Good thorough rinse. I'll make sure I didn't miss like Bobby's kind of follow up. Not yet. I'm still behind in chat. Sorry. Dragon Wolf 12. I like the 12 part. Dragon Wolf, we're going somewhere, being edgy. No, I'm kidding. I fell in love with the Apisto Blue Flame. Those fish look so good. I have seen them in person at a couple friends' house. I like that Blue Flame Apisto a lot. I think there's a lot of things that you can't see in photography of them. I know I'm gushing at this point, but I'll get to your question in a half sec. When you're there watching them in person, they're kind of like rainbow fish. They've got that little iridescent sheen that's really hard to capture in cameras, whether it's video or picture. But to your eye, you cannot miss it, especially under good lighting. Oh, they're probably one of my favorite Apistos that I've seen in the last 5-6 years. They look so good, and they're a simple, easy Apisto. They're not super complicated. They're not crazy rare like the Elizabethes and some of those like really, really hard to find Apistos. But man, yeah, love them. Anyway, I considered breeding, but my pH is 7.8. Any advice? Okay. Here's the first thing I would suggest, Draw. Just get them a nice, stable tank. Put your pair in there and let them do their thing. Many Apistos, not all, but many, will adapt to their water. And as long as they feel that they're safe, they have a good place to hide and protect their fry, and they have stable, especially very small foods that they think, right, that triggers that instinct that, like, there's plenty of food. Babies should be able to eat okay, right? As long as you provide those parameters, you would be surprised the number of fish that will breed outside of the parameters that we're told need to be kept in order to get them breeding. That would be my first start point. That way we're not fighting our water. It's all about us just creating a nice tank where they feel safe. Maybe you have a few ditherfish just in case so that the parents don't start fighting each other, because if they have something to like protect their babies from, they're less likely to fight each other. You know, simple Rasboras tetras, all your kind of usual fast ditherfish, right? Pencilfish, another great one with them. Just make sure you got a lid, right? Make sure you got a lid so that they don't get bullied too much and start jumping. Then, if you don't see any stuff, that's where I would consider maybe messing with your water. And I wouldn't use any chemical buffers. There's a couple of ways you could do this. If you're doing it in a small enough tank, you could cut your water down by water changing with distilled water. I suggest this because John Ebson's mom, right? So John, who's I've known through his mom is where I got my guppies, right? She used to do water changes in her tank because her well water was too hard and she was having difficulty with the guppies. So she would do water changes using distilled water so that the mixture between her well water and the distilled water would create a softer water but still have mineral content to make those fish happy and help them make bajillion babies, right? That would be my first go-to, rather than going and getting like a full RODI unit. There's a lot of, if you have a local, say, reef store, saltwater-based store, many of them will sell like at 5 gallon at a time RODI water. And that's another thing you can look at is if you have a local store that has an RODI system, see if they will sell you RODI water if you want to go easy, or look at an RODI system yourself. Create a small amount of RODI water based on what you need to water change, and blend your normal harder water with that either distilled or RODI, however you're going to do it, to bring that water's pH and hardness down a little bit. You don't want to crash it a ton. You don't want to go pure distilled or pure RODI. That's where the scary stuff happens. But if you blend it at like 50-50, maybe it only needs to be 75-25, whatever it may be. As you're doing your water changes, you can bring that down naturally without having a big shock to your fish. Kind of similar to what we were talking about with the person with the RODI unit and about trying to go for their kind of special fish. That's an option. But I would start with just create a nice environment for them and see if they do it in your water, even though the parameters might not be perfect. They might just adapt, be happy, and go like, we're making more Apistos. We're going to make a whole lot more Apistos. You never know. Never know. Fish will surprise you all the time. All the time. It's the best part about fish. They surprise the heck out of you. Uh-oh. I see a problem question. I'm just kidding. Tyler, thank you. This helps a lot. Happy to help, man. That's my favorite part about doing streams. Make sure I didn't miss another question. Johnny Best. If live is out of reach for the Hikari freeze dried as the second best option. Yeah, Hikari probably has the best freeze dried food as far as quality and lack of risk. But yeah. John, I'm driving down Saturday morning and staying Saturday night. Yeah, they have it advertised as like Friday through Sunday. So my thought was to try and come down Friday night and then That way I can leave Saturday evening, but maybe I'll swap that. I'll talk to the guys down in Portland and figure it out, and then I'll just pick a day. But I'll be there Saturday at some point, no matter what. So we'll see each other. I'll bring you a present. A good present. A really good present. Jackson, they were in different tanks and both started showing bloating signs. So this is talking about the killifish and the Apisto the day after feeding frozen bloodworms. So my other concern, how long had you been feeding frozen bloodworms and what was the regularity? You were feeding them 1 to 2 times a week, but never a huge amount. Feeding nano pellets, baby brine shrimp, extreme flakes, rotated every day. So my fear there is that maybe your batch of bloodworms was bad. Was it, I mean, how long had you been feeding them becomes my question. We're not doing it all the time. We're doing it 1 to 2 times a week. My concern is like maybe in transportation, they thawed out a little too much and then we refroze them, which is the most common way that like you have issues with a lot of your frozen foods. It's actually a reason that I stopped buying frozen foods from Aquarium Co-op. Not because of anything they're doing wrong, but just because my drive home, I would stop buying them in the summer. Because even getting them in a styrofoam container, I couldn't keep them frozen enough. And they started to just thaw out enough to where it started to make me paranoid. So I started buying, when I buy frozen food, I started buying it kind of in mass at a local place. And then I just like stock up for a while. And I feed more sparingly. I feed like once a week frozen when I have it. Which right now I haven't had frozen food for a bit because I've been too busy for my own good. But yeah. Zen Ginger, because Fishtoberfest just sounds silly, but it's accurate. I'm a function over form guy. I almost said I'm a form over function guy. I was obviously the opposite because I have no sense of style. I prefer function over what it looks like. It might sound silly, but maybe that's what you need. Silly markets very well. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. Oh, man. Okay. Let's see. Mega Machamp. Let's go, champ. Good to see you, buddy. What are 3 fish you have never kept but would like to keep next? 3. I gotta give you 3. I mean, does it count if it's a type of fish I kept before but not the species? So inherently, there's a couple of different rainbow fish I haven't owned but that I would like to keep. I really want the Clausioensis. Just because it, kind of like the Running River, has a really cool story. Not quite as cool as the Running River, let's be fair. That story is the best story in Rainbow Fish, if you were to ask me. I'm totally not biased. The next one would be the Myrisai. I actually like the Myrisais a little bit more than the Kalitawas. I know this sounds like blasphemy. Kalitawa is awesome looking, but that's only because everybody and their mother out here who's a rainbow fish nerd has Kalitawas. Not as many people have Myrisais. So I think it'd be kind of fun to have the fish that not everybody else has. But as far as non-rainbow fish, there is the magenta bicolor Luke Roebuck guppy that I want desperately. Desperately. Let me put that again. Desperately. But if we were going outside of, let's say we go outside the realm of fish that I've kept before and truly go into the world of things I've never kept but I'm interested in. I've never successfully kept certain shrimp for a long period of time. Does that count? No, it doesn't. I would be really interested, actually, it's not a fish, but some of the like freshwater clams and mussel type fish, so like freshwater bivalves, I'd actually be really interested in keeping some of those, just because having had the sponges in my tank for a really long time, the freshwater sponges, or being able to set up a system that could really truly let freshwater sponges go hog wild long term, that would be the other interesting thing to me, because they're so different. And I kind of appreciate different a lot. Not necessarily different in like ambush predator pufferfish. Like, yeah, potatoes are interesting and all. And I know you're like, but Bentley, it's a bivalve. It ain't moving anywhere. That sounds boring too. I get it. But it's things that I could, in theory, keep with some of my other fish. And that makes it kind of interesting and different to me. The other thing that kind of really is up my alley that I haven't kept. This is where this gets a little hard because I've sort of kept them, but I haven't kept this particular one. And that's there's a couple Pleco species that I'm really interested in. There's the L, I think it's 306, which is the kind of alternate version of the 397. I might have the L number wrong on that, but it's very similar with the big wide orange bars. It just has a different facial pattern, and it keeps more of its orange long term. That's a fish that I just really want to have, but it's also similar to 397, a bit of a wood-eating pleco, which I've never had wood-eating plecos. I mean, I've had ancestris, which eat a little bit of wood, but never something where you have to have wood in the tank to like truly make them happy and complete. And it comes with its own problems, right? Because it creates a lot of debris, but that's inherently interesting to me. The only other thing I can think of at that point that I haven't kept is the little like the little tiny fire eels that Dan has been getting in because they just look cool. It's either that or rope fish, one of the two, because those would be things that I know my wife would really appreciate and could probably live with our Dojo loaches in this like crazy noodle tank of doom, because my wife really wants a noodle tank. And most of it will be Dojo loaches, but I'd like to have some mix up in there because I think it'd be fun to have a rope fish in there as well, and maybe some of those smaller fire eels just because they look so cool and they don't get like 30 bajillion feet long, you know. I think that's about where I'd cut it. Other than that, like you have to start going into the stuff that I don't want to do next, but things I want to do at some point in my fish career. So like Cyanodorsalis, which is a brackish water fish, although I would keep it full salt. Because you can keep them full salt with macroalgae and do a saltwater planted aquarium with rainbow fish and pseudomagills. So not really rainbow fish, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. Or clownfish with anemones, because I love clownfish hosting in anemones. It's the one behavior out of all of saltwater that I love the most. And about the only reason or that I will ever keep saltwater is those two setups. But that's not anywhere in the near future. All right, I got to move on. I'm talking too long. Never shut up. Pets Corner, what do you think of citric acid and baking soda systems? So this is like the DIY CO2 system without using like yeast colonies and all that crazy nonsense. Yeast colonies suck. The citric acid and baking soda is a more controllable DIY system. I think in the short term, people will see it as a way to save money. In the long term, it will cost you significantly more money than investing in a proper CO2 system in the first place. And the proper CO2 system maintains more consistency over time. The citric acid and baking soda systems are more stable than like building the yeast colonies and doing all that nonsense, but they are less stable than proper CO2 canisters, right? So yeah, I think they're fine. I think it's interesting if you like playing like, you know, grade school science project at all times. You know, the volcano, you just try to do that effect in your tank a little bit. But realistically, if you want to do long-term CO2, you should just get a proper CO2 system. It'll save you way more money in the long term. Because eventually the citric acid and baking soda, the combination at the rate that you have to refill it just starts costing you more than what it would to like go refill a CO2 tank in the first place. Yeah. Bravehearts, did you enjoy your Seahawks win on Sunday? I'm going to be honest, man. The first half of the game was like, are we a lot worse than I think we are? Because I feel like we're a way better team than what we performed in the first half. The second half, our offense kind of figured out what the F it was doing wrong, but our defense was just mauling the poor Broncos, and I almost feel bad for poor Bo Nix. Maybe that's just because he went to Oregon, so he's close enough to where I'm like, I want this man to do well because he's a Northwestern. We put this in giant quotation marks. He's a Northwest boy, right? In that he went to one of our Oregon schools. He was a Duck, wasn't he? Was he a Duck? I don't follow college that well. I just know that he went to one of the 2 Oregon schools. All right. Cut me some slack here. Maybe he's a Beaver. I don't remember. Anyway, I don't really follow college football. But rookies in the NFL at a quarterback level always have hurdles they have to overcome in their first few games. Because you have to keep in mind, like college football, I don't know, fish people, we're on football, I'm sorry. College football, the best teams do not have a full NFL team worth of talent on them. They might have like half an NFL starting roster worth of talent, and those are like the best college teams to ever play college football. Very often, 1 or 2 extremely gifted and talented players are all you need at a collegiate level to be one of the top tier collegiate teams. Right? Because half the time they're beating up on little schools that like just exist to basically go get their butts beat to earn a paycheck. Bishop Sycamore, we're looking at you. When he was in college, he had a couple of very talented receivers and often played against teams that did not have the level of defense that a professional defense is. The thing you got to keep in mind in like the NFL, your backup players are similar talent level to the very best college players in the entire country. Not just a college, the entire country. At the NFL level, everything is just faster and better and stronger. So there's a gear shift that has to happen, especially quarterbacks, where they have to be able to read the defense faster, make more accurate throws, make harder throws. They have to have more zip on the ball because people are just so naturally fast. Seattle's defense is a great example of this, that they will pick things off that in college would have been a safe throw. So, do I feel great? Of course, we won. But I kind of felt bad at the same time. And at first, for the first half, I was sitting there going like, we had 2 safeties basically back to back. We had a fumble. We were playing like hot garbage. Our offensive line looked like a wet paper bag, and we took an injury when we already had an injury at one of those locations. So we put in Stone Feet Forsyth. Stone Forsyth is his actual name, but his feet are basically like concrete blocks. He has horrible movement, which is why he's our 3rd string lineman. And I don't know why we keep paying him, because God does he suck. Anyway, room to improve. But I am generally impressed with Mike McDonald's changes to our defense. Our defense looked very nice. Very nice. All right. I'll try and zap through these last couple questions. We're already over time, but yeah, we haven't streamed in 2 weeks, so we're going to do it. Gonna do it. Wei Ming, get Mudskippers. No. I actually Zenzo has 3 different varieties of Mudskippers, and they're just not a fish that interest me. That if I'm going to get a dopey looking fish, which is how I like to put it, I'm probably going to look at ropefish, because they look kind of dopey, and I think they're adorable. Where Mudskippers just don't tickle my fancy. There's so many other things I would rather keep in brackish water setups, quotation marks, that don't involve that at all. They're just not my jam. I think they're interesting, right? Because you can hand feed them and all that kind of stuff. But at that rate, I'd probably look at doing, some kind of small puffer instead, like a Congo puffer, the Shotodena, right, as an example, because you can get them to hand feed at a point. You risk getting chunks of your finger bit off, but yeah, you can do it. They've just never floated my boat. I think they're interesting to watch from afar. It's not something I look at and I'm like, I need to keep that fish. I look at them like, I think it's kind of weird. All right, I get it. Not my jam, but I get it. Luke Wang, I've really been thinking about getting an elephant trunk snake recently. What the hell is this? If I was going to get any snake, probably be a royal python of some form because it's a pet rock. I actually really like rainbow boas, though. They're just such really interesting fish. I see why they call them elephant trunk, just from their pattern and coloration. Right? I don't know. I said fish tonight. It's an interesting snake. It's not really a fish. It's an aquatic snake. Still not my jam. Snakes have never been something I've like really wanted to keep. Usually it's someone else that I live with that like kept snakes, and it was like, yeah, they're cool enough. Tropical Tank TV. If I ever went salt, I would want a peacock mantis shrimp. Those things are really cool. Do not get me wrong. They're really cool. There's something about the way that like clownfish swim that kind of is derpy and dorky that I love, that like shimmy that they've got. Plus their natural like living with anemones in like symbiotic relationships is something I love. Whips World, let me hear your thoughts on calcium buildup pretending it's concrete beneath the waterline. I have asked this question on multiple lives and nobody's heard of it. How do I deal with it? So you're talking about like the calcium buildup at your top of your waterline as it evaporates and then you fill it back up and you can never get rid of it. I'm assuming that's what you mean, Whip. In that case, what I would say is if you really need it gone, usually it's a small amount of white vinegar and a lot of elbow work. But usually you can never get rid of them fully. And then what you need to do is actually drain a tank. And you usually need something a little bit more powerful, like citric acid, or potentially even look into slightly stronger acids, nothing too crazy, to actually like break it apart and get it off. And then you have to do a bunch of work to thoroughly rinse and clean the tank to make sure it's safe for fish again. I don't have calcium buildup to a level where you actually like see physical buildup. It's just kind of that little white layer on the glass, and it's never so obnoxious that I've had to like get rid of it entirely because I just kind of maintain a water level. And even when I evaporate a bunch because I'm working too much and I don't get my water changes in fast enough, it's like I'm the only one who really sees it, and it doesn't drive me too crazy. But I also live where there's almost nothing in my water, so it takes forever to build up. And it's mostly because I buffer my water to keep it safer. Probably not the answer you're looking for, Whip, but, you know, if you really need more, we can talk. You know how to get a hold of me. You know how. You know the way. You know the group. You know the way. Oh, man. I am totally behind, but I want to get so many questions out of the way. Oh, nope. Hot, caught up. Woo! I left the stronger acids back in my college days. No. Not that kind of acid, Zenny. Not that kind of acid. Oh, man. Oh, man. This is why I love these things. Some of y'all love to get a little wild. Go Niners. I mean, your team has so much talent. If you can't win a Super Bowl this year, I mean, a lot of questions are going to start getting asked. You guys have had the most talented team in football for like the last 4 years. And you keep adding to it. And yet, still can't win a Super Bowl. I do love Brock Purdy, though. That kid is going to get a massive freaking contract. That man is going to make ludicrous amounts of money. Ludicrous. Whips World. No, it's that stuff, but it's happening below the waterline. It's happening in 2 different aquariums now. It's so weird. I mean, my assumption is you just have a significant amount of natural mineral content to your water. And how much flow do you have for it to happen below the waterline? I mean, is it like specifically here's your waterline and it's a ring right here? Or is it like the entirety of your glass is kind of getting some stuff on it? Whip, you know how to contact me. I know you do. Let's chat. Let's try and figure it out. I'm happy to help. I think I need a level of like I almost need a level of visual detail to understand what's going on. Does that make sense? All right, gang. We're definitely over time. But yeah. I'll put a post up It's the entirety of the glass. Okay, so you're just dealing with high levels of mineral content adhering to your glass. That's tough. Yeah, we'll talk, buddy. We'll figure it out. Anyway, gang, I want to thank you all again. I'm going to put up a post, and if you have other ideas, but by all means, comment. Let me know. Replay crew, let me know in the comments if you have ideas. Just trying to figure something out as we get used to the new work schedule, because I don't want to just like continuously cancel stream, but then also have nothing in its replacement. If that makes sense, I want to do something for you guys. And not purely because it makes me that extra like $2 on my YouTube revenue. That's about what it is. It's not much, but it's just I like being able to talk about topics, help you guys out, have those conversations, things like that. It's just the stuff I love about streaming, and I want to find a way to replace it as a temporary until we get back to a schedule to where I can reliably stream again. Or maybe we just change the schedule up and we reliably stream different time, different day. Who knows? We'll figure that out. Community tab post will be coming. Look for that. Please, please, please. I want your feedback. Vote, comment, whatever it may be. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. And stay awesome. Make it rain. Making it rain pennies, baby. Big time.